you know, tagging off of what Gail just said, question 4, when you go to purchase a firearm, it's still a federal transaction, are you an unlawful user and or addict of any controlled substance? Okay, it may be legal in Utah, but it's still illegal under federal law. You cannot buy, possess, hold a firearm or even ammunition once you start doing this. So I've never heard that brought up before though, but it's out there. It's definitely out there. It may be legal in Utah at some point, but it's certainly not going to be, the Fed's going to take a very dim view of that. Okay, Second Amendment. Got my timer going here. We can do this. I can get all the great stuff out. In thinking of this talk, I didn't know if I wanted to warn you or to inform you. So I decided to do both. Let me inform you. And to inform, in this case, is going to be warned. And to be warned, we know that you've got to warn your neighbor. So I'm going to give you some of the little insidious little things that go on. But before we do that, I'm going to take you back to 1775 and before. But at that point, the colonists in the 13 colonies were British. They weren't Americans. They lived in America, but they were British subjects, controlled and governed from across the ocean by King George III of Great Britain. And it's probably accurate to say that of late, around that time, the 1770s, and ever since 1768, that the king had thought they wanted too much. They worked at that the colonists were too much, they thought too much of themselves. So, long story short, he taxed them. We have the Stamp Act. We have the Tea Party, the rebellion, in which they didn't want to pay the tax on the tea. He put troops, actual military troops, in their towns. He had warships in their harbor, and he taxed them. Okay, well, the colonists, the reason the colonists left is because they were kind of irritated with the central government to begin with. But then come along, I'm going to skip forward a whole bunch of stuff to the real important thing. April 18th, 1775, the ride of Paul Revere. Paul Revere, along with others, had been dispatched to notify the militia that the British were coming. And we all know from our school textbooks that he yelled on his horse, "The British are coming, the British are coming." Two things wrong with that. He didn't yell anything because he quietly informed the people, and because there were British stationed in the troops, in the towns. So he didn't want to alert them that we know that you guys are coming. And he didn't say the British are coming. And this is an important point, because they were all British. Well, which British are coming? Us British or they're British? What he actually yelled was the regulars, the British Army regulars, regular army. They were coming. He didn't yell it. He informed. That's an important distinction, because the British regulars were coming to lay siege and to seize towns, ammunition, guns, gunpowder, projectiles from British citizens. All right. And so we know how that worked in Lexington and in Concord. The shot heard around the world. The shot that started that was started from British firing on their own people. Okay. Long story short, they were routed. The British regulars were routed on their way back to Concord, back to Boston, and there was a siege of Boston in the harbor there. So what's my takeaway from this? We see and we know that by sad experience that a government, intolerant of its citizens' demands against, in this case, taxation and a central controlled government, denying local control, will seek to put down any such rebellion, knowing that any rebellion is mere talk, without arms. That's why before they did anything, they wanted to seize the cache of weapons. Okay. So they can only do that and achieve that control by denying, restricting, and in fact seizing these arms. All right. Now, my last name is Aposhian. It's correctly pronounced Aposhian, but I don't even say it like that. It's Armenian. Does anyone even know the history of Armenia? Anybody know some history of Armenia? Know some history of Armenia? My family left Armenia in a big hurry. Actually, it was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints missionaries in the early 1900s that smuggled my family and other families out, and they got them to France and eventually got them to Utah. My great-grandfather, prior to that, just after he joined the church, we have a photo of him, and we figure it's about 3 or 4 months before this happened, was dragged out in front of his family in the town of Aleppo, where they had been forced marched many years before, and beheaded in front of his family. They had lived as a community in a town amongst these Muslim neighbors for many, many, many years. But something changed. It almost clicked. And that was that. Now, how did that happen in the interim, that you could just take a man out of his house and execute him without any resistance? What's that? Yeah, exactly. First, the records are that they regulated firearms. The firearms they had, folks, were rifles, long guns, and for hunting. But they still regulated them. They then started to restrict certain ones. Then they said, for your own safety, we need to register them. I actually have documents I got through genealogy of registered firearms. Then they outlawed people and certain firearms. And then finally, what was left, they confiscated. It was all done for your own safety. Okay. That is a pattern that is repeating itself today. It's exactly what happened to my ancestors. They came from Aintab and Aleppo just before they were slaughtered. So now let's listen to the words of the Second Amendment of the Constitution. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. There's a couple very interesting things in this that I've been reading. When we talk about a free state, we think of Utah or free state Nevada, free state of, wherever. How about a free state up here? A free state of mind, a free state of being. To be free, to be unencumbered, to be allowed to control your own destiny, to have your responsibility, and to have your freedom to choose, that's a free state. And I'll bet you there was more than one of the founding fathers that thought that when they put it in there. And then it talks about the right of the people to keep and bear arms. It talks about a right. It doesn't establish a right. It doesn't make a new right in the Second Amendment. It doesn't start something and put something that wasn't there already before and institute it. It talked about a pre-existing right. So who gave them that right to keep and bear arms that they speak of? God did, absolutely. And why? For defense. I'll tell you flat out, for defense. And is it for hunting? Yeah, it's for hunting too. Because if my family is starving and I need meat on the table, thank goodness I got a rifle to do that with. If my family is huddled in a corner and somebody is trying to break in, thank goodness I have a rifle to take care of that with too. If my town is under siege, or my state or my country is under siege, thank goodness I have a rifle to address that issue. It's defense. So you don't hear me, though, when I'm up at the legislature or other places, really harp on the Second Amendment too much. I think the Second Amendment is merely, it's recognized and it identifies a fantastic existing right, but it is an existing right. it would still, I believe we still have that absolute right, even if we didn't have it enumerated and listed in the Bill of Rights. And so you don't hear me talking about it because I think we have a tenuous hold on the Second Amendment. What it means is whatever the current Supreme Court thinks it means, honestly. All right. So, all of this talk of late is to ban some guns. Let's ban this gun. Let's ban that thing. Let's ban this bump stock. Let's regulate some other guns. So those that we aren't going to ban outright, we're going to regulate them. We're going to restrict who can have some of these guns. We're going to make folks wait longer to get a gun. And whatever guns are still legal to buy, we're going to restrict the number of rounds that you can carry in them. And then we're going to restrict the places you can go with them. Do these sound like infringements? Of course they are. All right. Does this sound like they're regulating, restricting, registering, outlawing, and perhaps confiscating? Yeah. I'll tell you what, I come from the San Francisco Bay Area, and I go back there often. I was just back there last weekend. And they are just, these good gun guys, good people, are so afraid to even bring some of their guns out of their home. They huddle them with them because they don't want to put them on Facebook. Oh, goodness sakes, don't put the pictures on Facebook. Because they have a gun that a year ago was perfectly fine. Now it's not, and it's not registered, and now is considered, and the registration period is gone, and now it's considered contraband. There is nothing to do with that gun but give it to authorities. And if they happen to find it in your trunk, it will be confiscated and you will be arrested. Yeah. All right. So all these things are designed to make people safer, right? All right. How about when crime doesn't go down when you have that? How about when they institute some severe gun laws, very restrictive firearm laws, in an attempt to, say, stop homicides? That it doesn't go down. Would the wise thing to do as a manager or governor of that state be, you know what, let's try something different. This didn't work. Let's try something different. No, what do? They just pile on more and more. It reminds me of somebody who was talking about this, and he said, you've got a road, a highway, 35 miles an hour. And everybody travels about 35, maybe 40 miles an hour. Bad weather, they slow down. Well, every once in a while, somebody goes speeding down that road, and they get a ticket. They're going 55, 60. They get a ticket. Well, one time, somebody goes speeding down this road about 120 miles an hour, rolls his car, it smashes into a home, and kills 2 children. If we were going to use the gun control logic, here's what we would do. Reduce the speed limit on that road to 25 miles an hour. Reduce the number of people who can use that road, and reduce the cars, and eventually just close off traffic on that road completely. That's exactly what we're talking about. Because, and I think they know it. My adversaries up on Capitol Hill and my adversaries around, they're not stupid. They know. They know what is going on. In fact, they're very clever. I will use the word clever. They're very clever, and they know how to use words. They know how to use words to get you to say, yeah, I want that. That's good. That's a good thing. In fact, Gail talked about, one of the poll questions. And Gail said, well, I would have probably said yes to that. I probably would have said yes to that too. And yet when it's reported, she's in the 60% that wants medical marijuana. Well, that's not what Gail wants. I know Gail, that's not what she wants. All right, so let's go over some of those to inform. All right, and because I'm looking at my clock, we don't have a ton of time there. Let's go to, well, you know what? Let's do kind of a synopsis on what we've got here in Utah, and then I'll tell you about our crime. We have, in Utah, I got to tell you, we are one of the most permissive states in the nation when it comes to firearms. There's no waiting period to buy a gun. You can be 18 years old to purchase a long gun from a dealer. You can actually be 18 and buy a handgun from a private party, private transaction. We have a shall issue concealed carry permit, although it could be better. We could have just a constitutional one, but we have a shall issue concealed carry permit. You don't have to give a reason. 18 years old, you can get a concealed carry permit and carry at universities with it. You can carry at 21 with a concealed carry permit in our K through 12 schools. You can have a fully loaded. Today, those of you that don't have concealed carry permits, today you can have a fully loaded handgun in your vehicle if you're over 18 and it's a handgun. Doesn't have to be concealed. It can be, it doesn't have to be, without a permit. You can open carry a handgun at 18 without a permit. You can have private party purchasability. It's not a criminal act to transfer a firearm between two people. There is no semi-auto restrictions in any way whatsoever on any types of rifles. There's no restrictions on the number of guns you can purchase at a time. There is no magazine capacity limit. There's no hollow point ammunition restrictions. Yes, they have. San Francisco and New Jersey, you can't have hollow point, which we call less penetrating and less ricochet rounds. And there's no bump stock restrictions. Now, that is why the Brady campaign, or whatever they're calling themselves now, gives us an F grade. They give us an F grade. Thank you. Thank you. I would wear that F grade proudly. Because you know what it comes with? Freedom. Yeah, it comes with freedom. And the data puts us at the 4th lowest violent crime rate in the nation. That includes gun crime. Okay, so now, I mean, if we had an F grade and we had, Chicago-style homicides and that's something. So I was appointed to the Utah School Safety Commission under a lot of contention. Boy, some folks did not like that. But they put the UEA lobbyist on, too. And they all liked her. Anyway. And so they said, how can we make, that was the question, the topic, how can we make Utah schools safer? Okay. And I thought, I had some ideas, and I thought, and finally I said, we might already be doing things here in Utah that make our kids safer, our students, staff, and faculty safer than these other states. Why don't we, as a school safety commission, try to identify the great things that we're doing and tell everybody else about it? Well, they didn't like that. No, and it devolved very quickly into assault weapons and waiting periods and magazine restrictions and red flag laws and that kind of stuff. But yet, in the same, maybe the meeting or two after that, but they weren't willing to accept that we might be doing something correct. We might be doing something here in weird Utah that is already protecting our kids. But then they came out, and we do have another distinction that's not a great one. We have a very high suicide rate here in Utah. We are 4th or 5th highest in suicide. Now, as far as gun deaths across the nation, is about 30 to 32,000 firearm-related deaths every year. And then, typically, if it's a gun control person that's up here talking about that, they said 30 to 32,000 gun deaths a year, ban assault weapons, mandatory background checks, so on and so forth. But you know what they don't tell you? That's an accurate figure, the 30 to 32,000. What they don't tell you is a minimum of 2/3 of those deaths, 66% minimum, are suicides. They're not done with their so-called assault weapon. They're not done, and those that are purchased, only about 5% are purchased with the intent to harm their person. They're purchased with firearms that are already owned, so the whole background check and the waiting period and that, not going to make any difference. But why, when they had the opportunity, when President Obama spoke in January 3 years ago, and he mentioned the 30,000, why didn't he then take that opportunity to say, our veterans are harming themselves every day, our old people are harming themselves, our youth are harming themselves, and it's got nothing to do with semi-automatic firearms or waiting periods or anything like that. They had that opportunity, they didn't do it. I'll tell you why. Because we sometimes, even when I hear their impassioned pleas before the legislature saying they've got to ban this and they've got to ban that, and it's for the children, so to speak, it's not for the children. It really, if it was, it would be a laudable goal. But like I said, they're smart, they're clever, and they know that that will get a reaction, an emotional reaction. Well, now, here I am. When I come up there, I'm kind of stuck because I have to give data. I don't do a lot of emotion up there, emotionally based arguments. I temper the data with emotion just to kind of get people moving, but I don't use a lot of emotion. But they do. And let me tell you some of the words they like to use to invoke emotion. And tell me if you have heard of these before. Universal background checks. It's universal. Everyone will get one. Okay, first off, it's not universal. Only I and other law-abiding people will get them. And the same people that are purposely not getting a background check now won't get one then. Automatic weapons. They like that term, automatic weapon. I just had a lady in Costco come up to me. And she says, I know who you are. And I know how when it starts like that, it's going to be. And I says, hi, how are you? And she says, I have my concealed carry permit. I says, oh, excellent. Conversation's going better. And she says, but I don't like automatic weapons. We don't have any need for automatic weapons. I says, yeah. I says, make sure we're on the same page here. Automatic weapons have been regulated since 1934. They're federally registered. They're on average about $20,000 a piece, sometimes more. You have to be fingerprinted, background check, and you have to carry around a tax stamp with you. Those weapons? No, the AKs and the ARs. Oh, okay, the semi-automatic firearms. Okay, but they use that term, that demonizing term, that emotionally attention-getting term to get you go. Gun show loophole. It sounds like a tax loophole. It sounds like you're trying to get by with something. There is no gun show loophole, folks. Every dealer in a gun show has to go through the exact same background check as if you presented yourself for a purchase in their store. There is no gun show loophole. There really isn't. Cop killer bullets. A cop killer bullet is pretty much any, and we're talking about a bullet that can penetrate a vest, a ballistic vest. They have 3A rating, 3 and 3A rating, and then they have some with plates on them. Any deer cartridge, rifle cartridge, including my dad's .30-30, will go through a vest. Okay? So when they start talking about that, handgun rounds don't, but rifle cartridges, almost without exception, do. High-capacity magazines. When we're talking about homicide, high-capacity magazines, and not meaning to trivialize this in any way, but by the way, multiple victim shootings, especially school shootings, have been the lowest they have been since 2009, something like that. So they've been steadily declining. But high-capacity magazines, and it is, and I hate to say this because it sounds brash, the number killed or injured is a blip compared to the overall homicide rate that is very closely linked to drug activity. Thank you very much. Okay. And so we're thinking, well, is high-capacity magazines a bad thing with crime, with homicides? So it's pretty easy to figure out, because the criminals are using semi-automatic firearms, which flip their empty cases out every time you fire a round. Flips them out, as opposed to a revolver, which they keep them in there. What's the average number of rounds found at a crime scene? Empty shell cases. 3. So unless they're going to make a 2-round magazine, they're not going to have any effect. But yet, there's still that anything over 10 rounds they don't like. Assault weapon, really, that was a term. In fact, I've got to read to you. Josh Sugarman. Josh Sugarman is a very famous anti-gun person who started his crusade back in the 80s. And he said this: assault weapons, this is a quote, "just like armor-piercing bullets, machine guns, and plastic firearms are a new topic. The weapon's menacing looks coupled with the public's confusion over fully automatic machine guns versus semi-automatic assault weapons. Anything that looks like a machine gun is assumed to be a machine gun. This can only increase the chance of public support for restrictions on these weapons." Josh Sugarman. He didn't mean for that to come out, by the way. He meant to keep that internally. All right. Arming teachers. Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education. I got a call from the media the other day, and the big thing on teachers and guns is, should we arm teachers? What are we talking about? We're going to arm teachers now? Is that crazy? And it makes for a straw man argument that just, oh, of course we're not going to arm teachers. They're there to teach. And then Betsy kind of went another step, and she said, she didn't say it in the exact words, but let's use tax dollars to train teachers, pay for their guns, their ammunition, their holsters, and put them in the schools. And the reporter called me up because they thought, well, we need a pro side for this, somebody that's going to agree with that. And I said, oh, no, I disagree with that. I said, absolutely not. I said, first thing's wrong is tax dollars. Second thing, tax dollars used to pay for training, pay for guns, pay for ammunition, pay for holsters. I said, if there was somehow maybe a laboratory that we could look at where it has been done and it's been effective. Oh, wait, there is. Utah. I said, in Utah, we don't arm our teachers, but we just don't disarm them. So there you go. Excellent, yeah. And it seems to work. The new thing now also, when they like to use this term, arming people. So now the new one is, in fact, I think they just passed it in California. Federal law allows for, and most, if not all states, allow for an 18 to 21-year-old to purchase a rifle from a gun store, from a Walmart, from that, a rifle or a shotgun, a long gun. And it's been like that since forever. And now we have one or two, and I mean literally one or two, that have purchased a firearm at that age and used it in an illegal fashion. Now it's saying that we should ban all those, or ban that practice whatsoever. And so for years and years and years, we've allowed 18-year-olds to purchase firearms. And so what does the left come? And I say the left because that's typically just an easy way to denounce that. What does the left say? We're now arming teenagers. When I think of teenagers, I think of 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds and that kind of stuff. I don't necessarily instantly go to the far end of the spectrum at 18 and 19-year-olds. But why do you think they do that? Because it's meant to elicit emotion. It's not fact. It's meant to elicit emotion. Another classic one here in Utah especially, but across the nation, we talk about, hey, in every one of my classes, and I'll tell you all right now, if you've got a firearm at home, and you've got someone within that sphere that's over all the time or even occasionally, you need to secure that firearm against all unauthorized access. And I know just by the ratio, some of you are thinking right now where that gun is, thinking, I meant to do that and I haven't done it. Do it today. On your way home, go to Walmart or Target and go buy a cable lock or an instant access gun safe. But do it today. Stop hiding it. Stop putting it out of reach, but get it done. So I'm no apologist for that. But then I thought I turned that off. Anyway, but then they say, well, we need child access prevention laws. We need the government to come in and tell you to lock up your gun. Because it's not enough that the NRA and the USSC and so on and so forth and your friends and neighbors and that tell you to. No, we need the government to do it, and there's a penalty too. All right, so it's called the CAP law, Child Access Prevention Law. All right, so let's look at some numbers. And I mean, I've had people just tearing their clothes and pulling their hair out up at the legislature because we can't get a CAP law passed. Child Access Prevention Law passed. All right. Again, not meaning to trivialize any death, but when we talk about children, we're talking about the industry standard or the government standard, 0 to 12 years old. How many of them in Utah die by gunfire? Usually on accident. Yeah, well, let me put it into perspective what the actual number is. Two things put it into perspective. The same number of children that are killed or injured by a firearm, whether by themselves or accident, is the same number, almost to the exact number, of kids of the same age that are killed or injured in farm machinery accidents here in Utah. And I just looked up a new one, or by flood. Not drowning, but by flood. And they are saying nothing about the dangers in our homes, like the chokings, the poisons, the burns, the falls, the fire, the drownings that happen to account for the other 99% of the childhood injuries and fatalities. They hate guns and gun owners so much that they want to single them out. And if you would have just listened to them, you'd think that, my gosh, it's got to be the other way around. It's got to be 99% of them. No, where did I get that? I got that from the Utah Department of Health Statistics. And I just say it proudly. I said, I don't have to pull these numbers out. You can look them up. They can look them up themselves. By the way, do we have a crime epidemic, a gun epidemic? Our crime in the United States, our violent crime in the United States, and our gun crime in the United States. First off, gun crime, we are at a 40-year low in gun crime and a 45-year low in violent crime. Where did I pull those numbers out of? The FBI's Uniform Crime Report that they just came out for 2017. And you can list it by everything from zip code to city to state to country. So is it an epidemic? Well, no. And how much time? Who? I can say this good. Crime in these United States, gun crime, violent crime, is not spread over these United States like so much Nutella on a piece of bread. You know how you try to get it all smooth and that? I'm trying to do a visual here. I'm trying to do a visual. No, it is centered in pockets, in certain pockets. We did it by area code. There's 44,000 zip codes in the United States. Let me tell you something. It's not just Chicago. It's a tiny part of Chicago. It's not just LA, but it's tiny little spots in LA that can more closely be associated with a zip code. Out of the 44,000 zip codes, if you were to take out 120 zip codes as the extreme, we would have the lowest crime rate in all of Europe. Flat out, 120. So why are we paying so much particular attention and such a high priority on Utah and an assault weapon ban? Oh, for goodness sakes. It's a deception, and it's a deception that, because I'm here at Newquist, was written about and warned you about in the scriptures. There you go. I had to get the scripture in there. All right. Thank you very much. This has been very enjoyable, and I am honored to stand in front of you and mingle with you in this fine group. Thank you very much, Dave Jorkins, and for inviting me.